Today's conversation is part of our Autism Playbook series, where we center real parent experiences and highlight the journeys that shape advocacy, leadership, and meaningful change for children with autism and their families. Let's begin. I'm Simone Olson, co founder of Amazing Kids. Amazing Kids is a virtual autism diagnostic clinic serving families across Florida. We believe children deserve access to comprehensive, evidence based autism evaluations in less than 72 hours. At Amazing Kids, we believe a diagnosis is not the endpoint, it's the beginning of a plan. Our mission is to empower parents with teamwork so children can grow toward independence and confidence. A critical part of that journey is learning from families who have walked this path before, from the earliest moments of uncertainty to creating impact far beyond their own homes. Today's conversation is about that journey. Today on Amazing Kids podcast, we are honored to welcome two incredible mothers, advocates, and leaders who have navigated the autism journey and gone on to create meaningful change in their communities across the state. Nicole and Michelle. Through their lived experiences, parents of children with autism, they have not only navigated diagnosis, therapies, and systems, but have also stepped into powerful roles as advocates, working with organizations, engaging with leadership, and contributing to efforts that impact countless other families. Their stories offer both practical guidance and a clear picture of what is possible, not just within a family, but across entire communities. Good morning, Nicole. How are you today?
Good morning. Thank you for having me. We're okay. I was saying at the beginning, it's a little bit of a rough morning with my youngest. So if I duck in and out, you guys, I think on this podcast of all will understand why.
Well, thank you for being with us, especially on a very busy morning. Nicole Grabner is president of One Voice Coalition Florida and a statewide advocate for disability and autism inclusion. She's a military veteran, thank you for your service, and graduate of the Florida Developmental Disabilities Council partner in policy program, working to elevate the voices of individuals with disabilities and their families in policy and community decision making. She also founded One Voice Brevard and has led initiatives promoting disability representation in the legislative engagement, including organizing advocacy events in Tallahassee and in Brevard County, and is Brevard County's first disability focused candidate forum. She is a frequent speaker at statewide conferences and advocacy events focusing on disability rights, special education, and strengthening supports for families. And as a disabled veteran and parent of two autistic children, she brings lived experience to her leadership. Welcome, Nicole. And also welcome to Michelle DeFeo. How are you today?
Good morning. Thank you for having me. I'm doing well. Thank you.
Michelle is a mom of four awesome kids, three adult children, and one teenager, which is what first led her into advocacy for children and adults with disabilities and their families. Her journey began by navigating non-public school placement and working through challenges within the local school system, which led her to explore home and community-based waiver services. Since then, she's become involved in advocacy at the local, state, and now federal levels and is the co-founder of Concerned Citizens of Self-Directed Services Maryland, representing over 4,000 individuals with disabilities and more than 10,000 support professionals. She is also serves on the board for Republican Club of Carroll County, Maryland. Welcome, Michelle. Nicole and Michelle, thank you for being here and for sharing your experiences with us. Dr. Hensley, I'll hand it off to you to get us started.
Good morning, good morning, good morning, everybody. This is so exciting. Two amazing women, and I know you guys don't feel amazing, but you absolutely are, to go from mom to legislative power and advocate. So we're so grateful for you both here today. Today, we want to really focus on your journey, the mother's journey from those earliest moments of wondering that something might be developmentally wrong with your child through diagnosis, through decision making, and ultimately stepping into advocacy and leadership. Like, you are the face of autism throughout our congressional and families. And I'm just so proud of both of you. So my hope for today is that you're going to give other parents clarity and direction through your lived experiences. So good morning to both of you, and thank you for joining.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
So let's just start at the beginning, the earliest stages of your journey. So when did you first, and Michelle, will go with you. When did you first feel concerned about your child's development?
So my daughter, I started noticing when she was about 1 years old, and she started just different movements within her body and then responding. And I just thought she was dainty. and, wise beyond her means, and kept pushing the pediatrician to possibly do some tests. And he said, just get her around others and see how she goes. And sure enough, around 2 years old, she had her first seizure, and then that kind of precipitated the whole slew of diagnosis.
Yeah. How about you, Nicole? What was your first developmental concern for your kids? I know you have two, so it might be very different as well.
Yeah, so I often refer to my kiddos as opposites of the same coin. So my oldest is my daughter. She was actually misdiagnosed at 2. We had some concerns, like she was running on her tiptoes. She regressed with her speech significantly, struggled with sensory issues, but as a girl was told that. So at the time we were stationed in Japan, we just came back from the United or from Japan to the United States that she was first exposure was a different language, so that would be why she regressed with her speech, or she's a little shy, or a lot of the typical misunderstandings when it comes to girls and autism. My youngest, my son, who's 10 years younger, presented very much the same way as my daughter. He was they call it colicky baby, right? Very difficult to soothe. And so, kind of from the beginning with both of them. And then he regressed with his speech and just had a lot of red flags, I guess, like that, to which the pediatrician for him immediately said we should probably get him tested. So, very different experiences for boy versus girl. But, even as a parent, sometimes it's, you see the signs, but you also don't want to see the signs. It's a really difficult balance, So that was kind of our beginning.
Yeah, thank you both for sharing that. I always like to tell parents, especially when I'm giving a diagnosis, this really is a process. It's a grieving process and it's a confusing grieving process. Having that feeling and that internal feeling as a mom that, gosh, just something is just not right. And afraid to say it, but then also like knowing you need to say it and step out of that comfort zone and become that advocate, only to hear somebody say to you, especially a healthcare professional, oh, just give it time, they'll be fine, they'll be fine. And it's hard. So thank you for both sharing that vulnerable time. What happened next?
Did you want?
Sure, you can
Oh,
jump. Yeah, we'll jump around unless it's
yeah.
easier for you guys to go back and forth. But
I was just gonna say, so my daughter, she just went on like a neurotypical child, although we decided to homeschool early on. It was just easier for us as military family to kind of do that, and it worked really well for us at the time. But when my son went through his diagnostic process, it actually took us almost 9 months to go through all of that, and even with decent insurance, again, very expensive process. But like you said, once we get the diagnosis, to which, at the end, you're not surprised. Because at that point, when you filled out all the questionnaires and you look at everything, you're like, okay, yeah, okay, logic. It doesn't take away from the impact of that diagnosis. Like you mentioned, there's a grieving process I think every family goes through when you realize that there's just going to be, we're not ending, but definitely a different path than what you had hoped for your children. So after that, I think, and I kind of hope for all families, they take time with that because it's certainly something that's going to, I feel like a wave. It comes and it goes. So there's always going to be these like first moments, I think, that even if, for neurotypical peers, when you have your child that has their firsts or their, wins, they're significantly different looking, you still have these waves of grief that come through. So just to acknowledge and realize that that's completely normal, if not overwhelming, but just, to honor that for every family because their journey looks different. For us, it was having my pediatrician's nurse tell me not to expect any quality of life from my child. That kind of was a huge pivotal moment for me. So, right after all of this, we go back and we're just trying to figure out the massive next steps because for us, they just gave us a blue folder with some resources and said, good luck. Here's your diagnosis. Just, go forth and conquer, I guess. I don't know. But, and then to have the follow-up be, well, I'm so sorry for you. This is horrible, but don't expect too much. And so that
that hurts my
was,
heart.
yeah, that was Unfortunately, I found not to be in the minority either. I've met a lot of families since then who have had very similar experiences with their maybe not their pediatrician, but maybe with another specialist or something where it just where you should have had understanding and empathy just didn't exist. So that was kind of our next pivotal moment.
Thank you for sharing that. And so, specifically, how long did it take you, Nicole, to go from starting the evaluation or getting the referral for the evaluation to getting the report for each of your kids?
For my son, I think it took about a year, to from first conversation, doing ASQs with a pediatrician's office to finally getting the referral to finally beginning the process because it took a couple months even after we got the referral. In Florida, there's just not enough resources for diagnosis. And in our county at the time, there was really only like one place to go. So for my daughter, though, she actually sought her own diagnosis after my son was diagnosed. She was 13 at the time, and I'm sorry, I can never tell this without crying. She asked to get diagnosed because she said she didn't want her brother to be alone.
Oh,
So we sought out a virtual option because, again, not many places, especially after, yeah, preschool or whatever, it gets harder to find people that will do administer, to evaluate once they're older children. I don't know why that is. And even for adults, like it's really difficult to find access for evaluations. But so we found one that was virtual that we had to pay out of pocket, but she wanted to go through that process so that way her brother didn't feel alone.
thank you for sharing that. And so that's why Amazing Kids is in Florida, right? So our mission is to transform two things that you said. The first one is the time. It's not acceptable a year from beginning to end for diagnosis. So we are going to do our best to stick to 72 hours. So once we get the referral, we're going to do a full comprehensive evaluation with a full report in your hands with a full comprehensive treatment plan within 72 hours. The second key point that you made, which this is our 10th seminar, and I ran a different type of seminar when I was working within the military system for 7 years, and I continue to hear it. It hurts my heart every time, over and over and over again. Oh, here's your diagnosis. Sorry, have at it. I mean, your kids are amazing. Your kids can do more than the average person. We just have to tap into them and teach them to be social and teach them to be flexible. And it really and truly hurts me to hear that we as a healthcare system are failing you and all other families because we're acting like we're giving you a diagnosis that your child is not going to ever function. And that is so incorrect. And it's just, we have to change this. So I apologize on behalf of anybody who is out there telling parents that their kids aren't good enough and their kids are not going to be able to be successful someday. So it hurts me to hear that. And the pain is still so raw and real. And it's been how many years now since his diagnosis?
Almost 4.
And it's still like that's hurting your heart more than anything. Because I know you're looking at your amazing son going, oh, look at him. He's thriving in areas I never would have thought he would be thriving in. And but that's still that pain never goes away. So if other healthcare providers are out there listening and watching, this is real and this is raw. So we don't know what your kids are capable of, just like we don't know what any other kid is capable of. We're going to give them all the tools and we're going to set them up for success. So nobody should be putting a cap on a child just because they're delivering an autism diagnosis. It doesn't matter who is giving that cap. And that nurse gave that cap probably many, many times to many different people, unfortunately. And so we're going to change that with Amazing Kids. That's our plan. So thank you for sharing that and being so vulnerable. So Michelle, let's transition over to you. What was your diagnosis like for your daughter?
Well, ours was similar to Nicole in the sense of it took several times, not necessarily a year, but with Madison, she's now 30, which is crazy to say, but she also, she has cerebral palsy, seizure disorder, and so there was many levels to the different diagnosis and original meetings that we had with the different doctors. I mean, one specialist led to another, and the goal was to try to have a group of specialists in one area because it just became so much to say, well, okay, well, I thought I just went to a neurologist. Now I have to, Madison has to go to a pediatric neurologist and then developmental pediatrician. Like there were so many different people who we sought out and varying diagnosis as far as the response, so having to sift through. But, the mode that I went into immediately was fix. I tried to fix and be the fixer. I think us moms innately go into that mode because we don't want our children to be hurt and or feel pain or anything. So I mean, I did everything. I took Madison swimming with dolphins because I read that would, fix things. I took her, and I still believe in prayer, but took her to many different prayer sessions and healing sessions. I mean, you name it, I did it to try to fix the situation and to fix her. And, I mean, as you said, Jen, she's amazing, how she is. But the challenging part is having to navigate the diagnosis. And to your point with what you had said earlier, when you're given a diagnosis, it's here you go, have at it. And, something that, and we went to Kennedy Krieger at the time because we live in Maryland. And for us, it was, here you go, here's a list of resources. The problem is that there's so many resources and everyone you called didn't have either a funding source or the staffing to help, or they asked for a Medicaid number, which she didn't have Medicaid. I mean, you name it, there was the barrier. And so really, it didn't take until she was maybe 5 that I was like, okay, this is not working. It's not really set up for families. This is set up for more of a bureaucratic healthcare system. So that's where I kind of shifted my focus and not trying to change the diagnosis, but change the system.
And so, Michelle, how long did it take you regarding the autism diagnosis? I know Madison has other diagnosis, which sometimes can delay an autism diagnosis, frankly, for somebody. From the first thoughts of autism till the actual diagnosis, how long did it take you to obtain that for Madison?
Probably about a year,
Yeah.
year. And actually even longer because they went back and forth. I had one doctor said that she had autism, another doctor said she did not. I mean, I think it really goes to say that if you look, enough to other doctors, you'll find something. And that is the issue. I do feel like it's a good and bad thing with the internet because you start looking at symptoms and you start Googling all the different things that your son or daughter's doing. And then you're saying, oh, I think she has this diagnosis. And then you seek out a medical professional for them to say that because that's what you're reading.
Yeah, and I think that's really what complicates autism. I mean, we have standardized tests, but there's no gold standard of a test because it really and truly is a clinical diagnosis. And giving that child time to mature and develop to see where those symptoms are sometimes necessary. And then sometimes it's not necessary depending on the clinician and the evaluation. And so I think that's where a lot of insurances really get hung up saying, hey, we have to do certain tests. I mean, we can't do certain tests for certain kids and some tests aren't necessary. And so varying opinions is not unusual as well. And then it puts you as the parent back in like, okay, I am the expert on my child. If this child has this diagnosis or not, it gets very overwhelming. And so once you had that formal diagnosis in hand, I'm just so proud of you two. You have gone to the extreme of this advocacy. You're in these early stages trying to figure things out, trying to figure out, do we have it? Don't we have it? And then now transitioning to, okay, we have it. What do we do next? And oh my gosh, you guys have gone all the way to Z of I'm going to build a team for my child. And guess what? I'm going to learn how to help you build a team for your child. I'm going to teach you how to build a team for your child. And I'm going to advocate for you to get the policies changed. So anyway, we're going to get to that. But what happened next for you, Michelle? Now you have the diagnosis. What was practical like for your next steps and what made the biggest difference for Madison and for your family early on in that diagnosis?
Well, what really did it for us is that is the quality of life. I mean, my husband and I, we sat down and it was a no-brainer for us to build a family that that's centered around love, regardless of a diagnosis. And I come from both my husband and I have big families that all love each other dearly, and with siblings, and we chose actually to have more children versus not, because that has come up, like, why would you have more children? And which, you know, to you don't want to know my response. I'm going to try to keep it G-rated here, but but it was important to my husband and I to create a family that centered around love first, and then hopefully everything would fall into place. It wasn't always, roses by any means, lots of tears, but it started with the pediatrician, obviously, because I call them the team captain. And then we sought out the developmental pediatrician, not just the pediatrician, because you need that local doctor for viruses and such. But it was important to build a team around Madison, and not to be reactive, but to be proactive. And that was seeking all the different medical professionals that could potentially be needed, and to put them in place. But along with our family too. I mean, it's not just the medical piece. I mean, this is a whole treatment plan. It's not just medical. And that's what's so important, because, reaching out to your family is your support system, and your friends, your neighbors, because otherwise it can be very isolating, especially with behaviors and, all the things that come along with it, having to always have a plan A, a plan C, B, and C. And I always say plan D is always abort the situation, abort, leave, be done. But it's really important to build that support system that's non-medical as well. And your church
Absolutely.
family is important.
Absolutely. And in the autism playbook, we really like to kind of drill down in this seminar too. And in the book, that you have your medical experts, you have your community liaisons, you have your advocacy groups, and you have your family. I mean, you have so many people that you have to put on your child's team. And as you say, when we need to abort the mission and that player is not doing their job, we need to put them on the bench, because if they're not going to be an active, and even if that's a family member who's constantly bringing you down and being negative about the diagnosis or negative about something that you're doing, intervention, if they're not being helpful, they need to be put aside until they can learn to be helpful if you ever bring them back on the field. So thanks for sharing that. Cole, let's jump over to you. So what practical steps made the biggest difference for you and your family early on in your diagnosis for your kiddos?
I like how Michelle mentioned, I don't know that we did it consciously, because at first I think a lot of focus was the next steps. I think we got buried in the next steps, right? But maybe not consciously. Since I went through school, one of my professors talked about social capital, and essentially that's what you're talking about, is building that village, that community for your family, for your loved one, because you can't hope that the government is going to come and make everything better. I think you ask any special needs mom, their worst fear is what happens to their child when we go. So it's everything from, like Michelle said, it's not just medical. It's about building that foundation around them, that beautiful, loving wall that's always going to support them no matter what. And that comes from, like she said, everywhere. It's not just doctors or therapists. There's our neighbors. My parents live across the street from us, actually, so we're kind of everybody loves Raymond style with the way that my parents and I are. But we're still, as we struggle to find specialists in our county. I don't have a developmental pediatrician yet, but I'm hoping someday I will. But we are. I look everywhere. I partnered with a lot of local nonprofits, and that started a bit for my community, because there's actually, while we don't have specialists in our county, we have like 6 nonprofits that are autism nonprofits in our county. And I always thought it was interesting because we have so many of them, agencies that specialize in working with our population, but they don't tend to work well together. Like they don't, like there's a lot of funnels, a lot of existing in these silos and not cross collaboration. So when I finished my schooling that's Partners in Policymaking, my biggest thing was to try to break down those barriers. So in an effort, like Michelle said, to continue to create that community, that interlocking of support around our families. So it might have started just for my children, but for sure, as you go along the journey and you meet more moms and you meet more families, it becomes about doing the best thing that we can for our entire community because we all need that support and we all need that help.
Is there, looking back, is there something that you wished, especially in those early years, that maybe you would have trusted sooner, someone or some group that you would have kind of brought in a little bit earlier?
I would say I wish I trusted myself more
Mm,
because I think that you're going to get bombarded after the diagnosis with people that are well-intentioned, well-meaning. They're going to have lots of opinions and judgments about what you do and how you do it. But nobody, absolutely nobody knows your kids better than you do. So I would say, mother to mother, parent to parent, regardless. And we have a lot of grandparents that are, primary caregivers in our area here. So regardless of whichever that situation is, trust your gut, listen to those red flags. Don't ever let anybody make you feel inferior for having an opinion about the best path for your child. I just trust that and also give yourself grace because it's an imperfect process on the best of days. I would say any neurotypical parent will tell you that regardless of the child, we all make mistakes and we're not perfect. But even more so when it's a special needs family, you have to learn, and I still struggle with this, so it's more of a do as I say, not as I do, but give your family some grace.
absolutely. That's so beautiful. And I always like to say that to parents too. I might be giving you an autism diagnosis for your child, but you are the expert on your child. You have good instincts. You need to trust yourself. If it doesn't feel right, you need to redirect. And if it feels good and everybody's telling you no, too bad, do it anyway. Whether that's choosing to homeschool, whether that's changing therapists, whether it's, hey, you know what, we're going to stop therapy for a period of time and we're going to join the baseball team and we're going to do a pottery class and we're going to just be a kid. Like, trust your instincts. So, this journey, there's a lot of fear and uncertainty that can kind of evolve over time, and hopefully that improves as time goes on. Nicole, what were some of the fears or misconceptions that you had early on that you see differently today?
Think, oh, there's a bunch, right? But I feel that a lot of people mistake invisible disabilities, and not just autism, but all invisible disabilities. But they mistake a lot of things. So they make assumptions. They see someone, regardless of whatever disability, if it's visible or not, they make assumptions. And I would say that, try to push aside those assumptions, that inherent bias or that ableism. There's a lot of conversation about how we can help our children better fit in with the world. And I kind of counter to that. I think that it's more about how do we get the world to better work for our children. It's an adjustment, it's a shift in that mindset because my child doesn't need to make eye contact to be aware of every single thing that's going on around him. He takes in everything. I also say that, if there is a meltdown happening, please don't assume that it's because we're not parenting correctly or it's is a selfish behavior or anything. It's more than likely a sensory overload, and we're just doing the best that we can. But regardless if this child has a disability or not, there's a lot of assumptions that parents to parents or people to people make. So I just try to challenge, especially since we're in April and we're talking about autism. Some people will say it's awareness, some people will say it's acceptance. For me, I try to talk about inclusion. So it's taking it a step further from being aware and accepting. It's about, hey, I need to change my perceptions and adjust my stance to make it so that way they feel included regardless of the situation. So that's basically, I think, where I would go initially.
Absolutely. And I just actually saw yesterday in Fairfax County, Virginia, the police are doing a new initiative where there's a blue envelope that someone with autism can apply for. Have you heard of this? You look like you've heard of it.
Yeah, they also just passed a law in Florida. It just got done. The Blue Envelope program was a bill at this most recent session. They talked about having, I wish it was expanded because obviously I would prefer for all first responders to be more familiar with invisible disabilities especially autism, but this can also go to dementia or Alzheimer's because it's very,
Correct.
very, this can be inclusive for all, but that way they become aware of if there's an autistic child or someone who's driving who's with autism, that they respond differently to commands, that kind of thing. So it's what they call a blue envelope program.
Excellent. It's exciting. I'm glad you knew about that. So thinking outside the box, right?
Right.
And so, Michelle, what were some of the early fears or misconceptions that you had that you see differently today regarding the autism diagnosis and your journey?
So I would say, I mean, obviously echoing what Nicole has to say, but that everything needs to be perfect. That what happens inside our home has to be different than what is out in the public. As far as when, it was important to me that when we would go to church, that everyone looked just so. Meanwhile, my daughter would be pulling the bow out of her hair and dropping it. And I mean, it was just, all that was a misconception I look back on now that, picking those struggles of what should we look like? We chuckle within our family today that, what we probably look like to normal families, is probably quite startling to them because walking outside the house, we do look differently. We're put together, but then inside the house, there's things that are, could be flying or swiped off the table because they didn't like a sound or, just those misconceptions. It's just because what we look like on the outside isn't kind of what we're experiencing on the inside, not just, what we look like physically, but also inside our home. It's also important to know that, and kind of what Nicole was saying about being isolated, as far as not putting ourselves out there, really reaching out to friends first, as far as trying to maintain those relationships, because it is an isolating piece to think, okay, well, my friend has four, neurotypical children, and we have four, but one is, just off the charts when it comes to the social aspect. And so then, you tend to shift away, and then that's when it becomes pretty isolating. When it doesn't
Thank
have to be, and it doesn't have to be.
So, whether it was in your own family or within like healthcare systems, what would you say, Michelle, was one of your biggest obstacles that you've had to navigate?
Resources, actual resources that families could use, practical, functional. No one knew about supports, in-home supports for children with autism and other developmental disabilities. When I first reached out to Madison's pediatrician, they just don't necessarily know about all the resources that are out there. And that was something that was important for me to find. So that piece was huge. And there are resources out there. It's just navigating the system.
Let's transition now to the advocacy. So, one of the most powerful parts of your story is how you moved from your own family's experience into advocacy. So, Nicole, what was the turning point that led you from focusing on your own child to stepping into a broader role?
So we every year in Florida there's a disability conference. It's called Family Cafe. And I'm told it's the largest cross disability conference in the United States, but I don't know. It's a huge conference. My husband and I go every year. It's a free conference for families. Probably the first place we ever felt seen, honestly, because it's just all a huge conference for 3 days of families like ours, informational, whatever. So we go, and I went to this class. Was called I think it was talking about parent advocacy, but it was about the Partners in Policymaking program. And so this is a program run by the Florida Developmental Disabilities Council. Each state, I believe, there's only maybe one or two that don't have this program, but you can Google it. It's a parent and self-advocate training course that goes for 6 months. So initially, I think that all parents are advocates. They may not realize it. Like every parent, every family member, you have a person with a disability in your life. You know what that's like, probably inadvertently. And but it's a bit more so. They give you the tools and the background knowledge and everything to kind of go to the next step. They don't really tell you where to go. They just kind of tell you like, here's the information and then go do the thing. They expect you to go do the thing. So like I said, after I finished my class, I was more focused on building avenues of collaboration. That's been my focus ever since. So moving past the training, I attended a lot of meetings. I went to a lot of different places to go, like even places that might not have been intuitively a space for us, like NAACP meetings or, League of Women Voters meetings or, just anything I could think of, I went to it just to get an idea of what the presence and what kind of conversation was available. A friend of mine told me once that if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And so when you talk about advocacy and we talk about having families that are probably lethargic on a good day, like you're just already overwhelmed and drowning on a good day. And like Michelle said, we always need resources. We can't ever, I can't underline and bold that enough. We always need more resources and help. But to try to get families involved because we need their stories, we need their voices to help, drive change, positive change for our families and community. It's hard because you're already exhausted. You're already exhausted, you're already overwhelmed, and really nobody has a rosy view of politics. I don't know a single person that does. So to try to convince people to get involved and to do that is difficult. But I think, if you keep in that mindset that if you're not at the table and decisions are made by those who show up, you're on the menu. So that's what I try to remind everyone. But that's kind of what the pivot for me was. And as I get into more of these meetings and I go and I speak with legislators, it's glaringly obvious that we have to be involved. We have to continue that conversation. We have to build those bridges because no one else is coming to save us. So, we have to advocate.
Thank you. Michelle, how about you? What was the turning point that led you from focusing on your own child to stepping into a broader role?
Okay, well, how much time do you have? But so it started out obviously advocating for Madison and solely Madison. However, I it came very clear that when I started advocating for Madison, I made isolated change, and that was for her herself, whether it was educational or policy. And then I found that at the end of the year or annually, I'd have to go through the same fight because I wasn't necessarily, sorry, changing policy. I was changing the reviewer's mind and solely that person. And if that person was different at the end of that annual year. So, but it was interesting. I got involved on the local level and was trying to educate our local delegation on the different or the lack of resources that we had in our community. I live in a very rural area, very conservative area. So, and you don't get anything done unless you know the right people. So, and I've always been interested in, I hate to say it, politics. Right now it's a touchy subject with me because we just finished session, but I've always been, and I love our community. So I love all things about our community, not just families and children and adults with disabilities. So I started going to meetings, political meetings, where they had political leaders. I started going to just different organizational meetings that I didn't even have interest in. I just wanted to hear about what they had and how I could link our individuals with disabilities within their organizations and how they could be a part. Because we don't want it to be where us versus them. And so after COVID, actually, there was a major shift during COVID. And prior to COVID, I noticed that they weren't so, when I say they, I mean our government wasn't so excited about families being so involved. And during COVID, they needed us. And it was interesting because prior to COVID, that was my big push, was utilizing families, whether it was families as paid support staff in case they're was a crisis. And sure enough, here comes COVID, and families lost, or the individuals lost all their support staff. And so families had to quit their jobs and stay home and care for their loved ones. And that's where I realized, okay, that's where I need to put my focus, is trying to educate the government on the importance of families. And I didn't realize that that was going to be such a pushback, because families really should be the go-to. And that's been the biggest challenge, and that we're still working through today. But educating our local officials as well as our state and federal.
Excellent, which really transitions us into our last section. So the systems level advocacy and leadership. Again, I'm just so proud of you guys for jumping out of your comfort zone into a level of advocacy. So I think most parents don't really understand. I think most of us don't really understand the level of engagement that you have both participated in. So I know, Michelle, you already started touching on a little bit. Can you just describe your experience working with local and state leadership, councils, commissioners, governors, pep rallies, public forums? Like, what do you want to tell us about your experiences and walking through this, testifying on behalf of bills and policies?
Well, I joke that, and I say to my family and friends, like, I just wanted to be a mom. Like, I just wanted to be a normal mom and not have to be up till 11 o'clock on these organizational meetings and what we're doing next, and trying to think about or trying to figure out what elected officials have on their brain and how they're going to vote and all of that. But so I've been a part of, I very much love our local delegation. Our state can be very challenging because there's so many elected officials that you don't have necessarily personal relationships with, because they're across the state. So what I've done, as well as my other co-leaders, we started a program, or started an organization. It's called Concerned Citizens of Self-Directed Maryland. And what that is, it's an organization that allows individuals who self-direct their services, that if they choose to vendor out to a provider for support, they can do that. If they choose to, and they're able to hire and fire their own staff, and so on and so forth. However, what's been really important lately is that there has been that big push against families. So 5 other moms and myself got together. We started this organization, and we've been reaching out, and we serve about 4,000 individuals. But the amount of families who have gotten involved, and it's been amazing. The rallies that these families show up for. I mean, I tell you, if ever I need something done and done quick, I'm going to call my families of children with special needs, because they get it done. And they show up. They show up, they don't ask questions, they just jump in. But what I will say, and that's really important, is and it does take time, but to have conversations with people in the community of other families, educate them on what's happening, along with elected officials. So Nicole, when you had mentioned about the forum, that's amazing, because that actually puts the candidate on the spot without putting them on the spot, because they know what they're coming in for. And I love that, because you're going to hold them to it. If they get elected and they say that they're going to do X, Y, and Z, you have it on tape, you're going to follow up, right? But it's really empowering the families to come together, and you get things done when you have more than just one person, when you have 2, when you have 3, and then that then becomes 10,000. And when you have 10,000 people who want change, they can't ignore. They cannot ignore. So.
I love it. I love it. Nicole, how about you? What was your experience been working with local or state leadership, participating in the rallies, the public forums, and testifying on behalf of bills? What's your experience? What would you like to share?
Um, okay. I'll echo Michelle, what she said. The squeaky wheel gets the grease. So essentially I think we have the numbers. We just have to bring more people to the conversation and get more people involved. I've worked personally on a number of local and statewide initiatives, like I said about the partnership. And I think it's got to be clear that nobody can do this on their own, so you just, you're not going to be able to walk into a legislator's office on your own, ask for the thing, and that's it. It happens. You're going to have a team. And my intent was always just to work in lockstep with all the existing teams and just to see how better we could work together collaboratively. And I think historically we've shown that this is always the best policy. We talk about timeliness for this conversation. We're celebrating the anniversary of the 504 sit-in in California, where they had partnerships with the Black Panthers came in and brought food, meals to the people that were sitting in at the California governor's mansion. So this was something that historically we've done before already. So I'm not trying to reinvent history. I think basically I'm trying to learn from it and apply it now. So we partnered across the state to get a voice at every delegation meeting that we could across the state for that talked about disability interests. So we did that last year, and it was great. I think we had almost 70% of the state completely covered with Voices for Disability. We did host a disability-focused candidate forum in Brevard County 2 years ago. We're getting ready to come up on the midterm elections here, so we have plans over the course of the summer to engage with Rev Up and a couple of other organizations that focus on disability rights to host micro interviews with our families and all of the candidates, as well as doing some candidate specific questions when we get closer to election. I've actually written a couple of bills. So, taking those crazy ideas and, spaghetti, it's spaghetti at that point, but you never know what's going to come from a conversation. So I just drafted something. I thought, I'm a mom, I'll just try. Worst thing, they'll tell me no. And one went through, the other one didn't. So we're still waiting to see what will happen next year. Like Michelle, Florida finished our delegate or our legislative session in March, but they didn't complete their budget. So they're going to be going back for special sessions, and that's something that we're focused on. It's, but the thing about it is, I think that people need to also understand that you don't have to drive to your state capital to engage in that process. In fact, the biggest conversations, the most impact you'll ever have is going to happen locally. You go into the city council meetings, you go to the county commission meetings, you talk to your school board. This is where, the majority of governing that directly affects citizens happens. So that's where you need to start. And they come from just casual conversations. You don't have to drive forever. You don't have to, it's great if we can get you there because we would love always to have more people engaged in the process. But the most impact you're going to have is locally. So that's where I would say is a suggestion for starting. But so our organization is called One Voice Coalition Florida, and we just continue to seek bringing more people up, together underneath our umbrella. We do a monthly newsletter, and we try to talk a lot about the different initiatives that we do there.
Nicole, what's next for you?
Well, like I said, April's a big month for us. So we have at the end of the month, we're doing our family festival, and we're also doing a kind of a roving art display of autistic artists across downtown Melbourne. And then over the summer, we're doing a campaign where we do micro interviews. So our families and our autistic adults or children will go up and ask one or two questions of candidates. And we'll be, doing hashtags for those on social media. So it's going to be kind of a collection of videos that we do across the state. Then we're going to be getting involved with the midterms by having candidate-specific disability questions that we're going to do, that we have them fill out and post online, kind of like 411, but just for disability-focused questions. And then we have our disability conference in August in Melbourne. So we're going to have, Michelle talked a lot about home and community services based waiver program. In Florida, it's run by the Agency for Persons with Disabilities. The director of that agency is going to be our keynote for our conference in August, but all of that can be found on our website.
Excellent. And Nicole, what would you say directly to that parent who's in the early stages of the uncertainty or diagnosis? Now that you're on the other side and you are, advocating at such a high level, what would you say to that new parent that's in that early stage and that fearful stage?
I think I go back to, allow yourself time to grieve. Seek out your family and your community, kind of draw your strength from that. Don't ever let anybody tell you that you don't know what's best for your children. But, you're not alone. Like Michelle mentioned, being a special needs parent, it's very easy to become isolated, to think that, there's no one there. And I just challenge any family with a new diagnosis to, reach out. Don't let that darkness take you, reach out and join hands. There's lots of families out there that we understand. Don't let yourself feel alone. I also think, it's important to understand, just like any neurotypical family, one family with autism is different from another family with autism. So, I think it's very important to understand that in today's age, not every autistic child is Rain Man or the good doctor. There's a darker side, but that doesn't mean it's, you're on your own. Please don't feel alone. And that's, we've got a lot of people that would gladly reach out their hands. So just remember that, I think.
Nicole, tell us something amazing about each one of your kids.
Oh man, we don't have time for all of it, but like I said, my oldest, she sought her diagnosis so her brother wouldn't feel alone. That to me is one of the most beautiful things I've ever heard of in my life. My youngest, he amazes me every day. I don't know. Right now we have his interest is sprinkler heads. So like his favorite store is Home Depot. We're there all the time. But so our floor is covered in sprinkler heads right now. That's his version of Legos. And he can tell you every single part of a black hole, every single sprinkler, like the parts of it, the different brands. I mean, we were in Home Depot the other day and he was educating the salesman about the different brands and their capability. I am amazed by both of my children. And so, just I think I feel like that's really important to remember that I'm a religious person too. I believe God has a plan. And so I think it's always funny sometimes to see what not every day is perfect by any means. I don't think any family has that really, but my children are everything, and they teach me every day about being a better person and a better mom.
I love it. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing and thank you for being vulnerable today. Michelle, we're going to transition over to you. What's next for you?
So lots of things, lots of things. Hopefully some a good few weeks of rest. So Jen, I might be hitting you up at some point.
Come on down to Florida.
But can I just go back real quick to what Nicole said about, I thought that was so keen to be at the table. Otherwise, you'll be their meal or you'll be off the menu or you'll be the part of their menu. I love that. I just have to add to that because something that I've learned over the last few years being a part of the political scene is that a lot of times they'll choose specific people to be at the table because their goal is, and when I say it's our government, as wonderful as they can be, there's always that narrative, but that they want you to follow. And my recommendation, and just because I've had to learn the hard way, is they bring you to the table, but they also want you to be easy and compliant. And, it's our job as advocates to speak up at those meetings and to make sure that there is accountability, because so many times being at the table, we bring them up, however, and we are so assured that they're going to follow up, and then they don't. They say one thing and then they do another. So it is really important to, while creating those conversations and keeping those relationships and being at the table, it is also just as important to press and to say all the things that are uncomfortable, because if that table is just full of comfort, then change won't happen. You want something tugging at their gut. You want something tugging at their heartstrings. And with that, that's why it's so important to bring your son or daughter to these events, to meet your elected officials, whether it's at the local level or at the state level, Because if they're only seeing us, we're put together. We have that hour that we're going to, hone in our message and really communicate that message. It's so important that they see, I don't like to say good, bad, and ugly, but the true meaning behind the advocacy. So that's really important. And I just feel like I need to say that because there's so many times where I've heard, behind closed doors on the political level that people are hand selected to meet at these tables and be part of these meetings. So I just wanted to add that. But as far as what's next for me, well, again, a break, just like a few days. And, we're going to reach out to the federal government and see how they can help us and let them know about our organization and keep pushing forward for our families. So, yeah, that's kind of what's next for us.
Tell us something amazing about your daughter.
Okay, so, well, having three, but I'll start off with Madison because she is the oldest. She is just the light of my life. And so there's so many things I could say, but there's never a day that she does not have me laughing or bring a smile to my face. My other daughter, Sophia, just because I have to give all of them. Sophia's super smart, as you know. She's the life of the party. And then my other daughter, Alexa. So I have three girls. Smart, witty, oh my gosh, and a defender of all things. In fact, she's going to law school to so she wants to fight for all individuals with disabilities and their families. And then my son, who is just funny, caring, and so observant. I will say there's quite a bit of age difference, about 15 years, 15 and a half years between Madison and Jack. And I leave the room, he covers her up with the blanket. I mean, he knows her wants, her needs. And at 14, what he'll say to me is, Mom, when, you know, I will take my future wife and I will take care of Madison. And I mean, to hear, your son, especially my son, to say that, all things are good.
Amazing. Amazing. You guys, thank you so much, Nicole and Michelle. Thank you for sharing your experience, your leadership, your commitment to creating change for children with autism and their families. Conversations like this remind us of why we're all here, why we're doing what we're doing, why we're in this space. Amazing Kids Autism believes that families do not have to navigate this journey alone. We are here with you to partner with you, to help you to open your eyes and to help you to see that your children can set the world on fire just like you're doing. So when parents step into knowledge and community and advocacy, the possibilities expand. And you have to be the one that's making the menu, not on the menu. I love all of the analogies that you guys came up with today. You have to have a seat at the table. You have to continue to advocate. And the goal is that at some point, your children are going to take over their own advocacy. So thank you both for joining. I see we did have a question in the chat, and we are 4 minutes over time. And I apologize for keeping everybody a little bit longer. If we have any other questions, thank you, Nicole, for answering our question in the chat. But we can definitely stay on if people want to ask some questions and turn on their mics. But with that, we can also end, and we appreciate everybody's time today. So I'll give it a minute to see if somebody turns on their microphone.
So I have one question, and maybe it can be our final thing, our final question. But given that, Michelle, you've been in, your daughter's 30, you said, I'm just curious how much change you've seen over since you first started getting involved and learning about it. It seems to me from sort of on the outside that there seems to be a lot more, it seems to be a much more, the perception to it seems to be changing in terms of autism in general, but I'm just curious. People seem to know more about it, but I'm just wondering from your point of view what you thought. And Nicole, I'd love to hear your thoughts too, even though it hasn't been 30 years.
Yeah, I definitely think that there's more programs and resources out there for individuals with autism and other disabilities. But it's also in how you have to seek them out. You're not going to ever have anyone knocking on your door saying, here you go, here's a list of resources. So it's really important for families to engage with one another and to discuss them. But and they change based on ages. And the early intervention piece, as you all are well aware, is key. But things change. Once they become adults, it's tough. It is no joke. It is tough to navigate the system. So that's why it's really important to focus on these programs when they're young. And you're right, Simone, there are more programs out there now, so seek them while they're there.
Yeah, I was gonna say that I don't have that breadth of experience, but from what I have witnessed, I think that even if we have more resources, I think that there's still a lot more needed. My concern is that there's a huge gap after children leave public school age. So they call that like the cliff. You kind of get pushed off the cliff for intervention and support services. So, just continuing the advocacy there. And Jen also mentioned the fact that, we still have diagnoses that take over a year. We have more people that are doing diagnoses, but we don't have, the breadth that we desperately need to keep up with that demand. We have diagnosticians that are more specialized now, and that's cool. We just don't have enough of them. There's definitely some advances that have happened, but like Michelle said, you have to kind of go and find them. I would, kind of advocate for any families to check out, your DD council for your state. I would also, for autism resources, check out your Autism Society of your state or America. That's another great resource. So kind of reach out. You can look for local community groups. There's always going to be some autism nonprofit probably in your area, and that's always a good starting point. In Florida, we have what's called CARD, which is the Center for Autism and Related Disabilities. So there's going to be resources. You just have to go and look for them. But yeah, so that's one way to start.
Thank you. You both have just been fantastic to talk to today.
Great questions. So I also want to
Thank you.
invite everybody. We have another seminar tomorrow. We're going to be featuring a behavioral health colleague. So these seminars go back and forth showcasing parents who are doing amazing things and parents that are taking care of amazing people to colleagues and professionals who are in the space caring for kiddos in all different areas. So tomorrow, I think a lot of people don't really think about behavioral health and bringing them in to support their children. Very focused on ABA, which definitely has an amazing role to play, speech and OT and PT. But behavioral health has a fantastic role to play in autism care as well. So we're going to have Miss Wendy Cumier on tomorrow. If anybody would like to join us, it's the same link for tomorrow. So I think we answered, Michelle, thank you for answering Jenna's question in the chat. Does anybody else have any other questions? We actually are, Nicole, you mentioned CARD. We're going to be having them on next week, actually, I think on the 22nd, right, Simone?
Correct.
Excellent. So you guys are all always welcome to come back into this space. This is a seminar that we are doing because we don't believe that just handing somebody a diagnosis, even though we're doing rapid diagnosis within 72 hours, it's still overwhelming. We don't believe in handing a diagnosis and saying, see you, have a good day. We believe in building that partnership and empowering parents with teamwork so that they can get this fire like you and Nicole and Michelle have to build the best team that they can for their children and to help their children function at the top of their ability. No limitations, nobody telling you that your child can't do anything, it's not good enough. It's never going to be in general ed or advanced ed or wherever you want them to be or wherever they want themselves to be in this world. So no caps, no ceilings. People with autism are amazing. So thank you everybody for joining. Jenna also said we will be posting resources with the podcast on Substack and YouTube as well. So thank you, Jenna, for that. And thank you everybody for joining, and hopefully we'll see you tomorrow. What time is our seminar tomorrow, Simone? Is it 10 as well?
It's at 10
It's at
as
10.
well. Mm-hmm.
Wendy's going to be joining us from Germany. She's stationed in Germany with her husband. So we look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow. And thank you, Michelle and Nicole. You were fabulous. Thank you for being vulnerable today. Thank you for sharing your experiences. And thank you for empowering families with teamwork. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Nicole, I'm going to be reaching out to you.
Okay, sounds good, Michelle. Absolutely.
Connections. Love it.
Friends.
See, meet everywhere.
Okay.